Vidyanjali is an unit of Sri Bhawanipur Gujarati Bal Mandir which was founded in 1945. Vidyanjali is affiliated to two boards, Cambridge International Assessment Education and West Bengal Council of Higher Secondary Education. We are running two boards parallelly and both the boards are up to class 12. We start admissions at the age of 2+, and a student who is admitted at the age of 2+, he or she can continue the school till class 12. Today actually 13 schools including Vidyanjali International School have participated, 12 schools and one Vidyanjali International School. And most of the reputed schools of Kolkata, they have participated with that intention that they will also, as educators, we have the responsibility to make our next generation aware about the fact that this climate change issue is a factor of concern in present time. So my idea was that only, and I'm thankful that yes, all the schools, they have taken the initiative to join hands with me. That is my concern, and my message to the next generation is that please come forward and take steps how we can fight with these global issues very soon. We shouldn't wait for longer. The idea of this climate change conference is to make the next generation aware of the global issue, which is a great concern of the present day to day. I just floated the invitation to the schools and I thought, let me see that how the schools they respond. And I'm really thankful and grateful to all the participating schools and the principals and the students, teachers, that they have taken so much of initiative to make their students participate in this conference. And I'm really thankful and grateful to my trustee and committee for encouraging and motivating us so much to do this conference. And whole Vidyanjali family today is with us to make this event a grand success. Thank you so much.
A very good morning to all. Our respected Principal Ma'am, esteemed guests from schools of Kolkata, and our honorable moderator, Ms. Pradipta Kanungo, the Principal, Bloomingdale International Academy. We sincerely extend our warm welcome to you all in this very pertinent and special seminar on climate change, the reason of concern of the entire world today. We look forward to your valuable participation as you come up with the hypotheses and solutions to tackle this issue and greet the would-be delegates in the Model COP26 today. May I now request our Principal Ma'am to say a few words. Thank you.
I feel extremely happy to welcome all the young leaders today at the Climate Change Conference. All of us present here today look forward to great discourse that would shape our way of thinking and reposition us in a space where we will be able to respond to the challenges regarding the environment in a much better way. The students will be able to generate their sense of commitment for the environment and usher in the concept of sustainability within present-day consciousness. Today, we have among us Srimati Pradipta Kanungo, Principal, Bloomingdale International Academy, a dear friend, colleague, who is not only a great educationist, but she is someone who has immensely contributed to inclusive education. I'm grateful to all my colleagues for showing great enthusiasm for this conference and our school trustees and committee members for supporting the endeavor. The excitement of our students and parents have enabled us to create such a beautiful setting for our conference. This conference is intended to weave the thread of mutual understanding, and I hope this space will be able to knit diverse ideas and translate them into hope for the future. Looking forward to a great time ahead, I declare the conference open. Thank you. Now I hand over the mic to Srimati Pradipta Kanungo, the moderator of the day.
Very good morning to all the delegates here present from the different schools, and we are here to attend the inter-school conference on climatic change. I appreciate and thank Vidyanjali for this great endeavor, because this is the need of the hour. We all know that our climate, that our planet is being threatened by climatic change, by global warming. And this particular decade, 2020 to 2030, is a very crucial time. This is the time that we must wake up and reduce the global warming to an extent that it will save our climate and our environment. You delegates today will contribute in a large way, because today you are going to be the mock delegates to to a conference like COP26 or 27, where the UN had organized similar conferences to make the people aware of the danger that we are facing due to global warming. So we'll start off the conference, and the rule is that all of you will be allocated at the most 6 minutes to put forward your views whenever and tell us about the climatic changes in the different countries that you are going to represent. So we'll start today's conference with a presentation by Bloomingdale Academy High School.
Good morning, everyone. I am Shah from Bloomingdale Academy High School. My topic, climate change in India. Climate change is one of the main environmental challenges facing the world today. It can also be a natural process where temperature, rainfall, wind, and other vary over decades or more. But presently, it gains high momentum due to inadvertent anthropogenic disturbance. What is climate change? Climate change is an abnormal variable in climate which affects parts of the earth. Climate. Why is climate change relevant for India? India is the most vulnerable climate change. India is most vulnerable to climate change. It has a numbers of economic activities and huge uses of fossil fuels. Effect of climate change in India. Effect 1. Causes of climate change in India: an increase of greenhouse gases like chlorofluorocarbon, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and ozone depletion atmosphere. Deforestation developed to human settlement. Excessive usage of fossil fuel. Effect climate change in India. Effect 1. A 2 degrees Celsius world highest average temperature will make summer monsoon highly unpredictable. What can be done? We should install flood warning system. Effect 2, droughts are affected to be more frequent in some areas, especially Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Orissa. What can be done? Invest in research and development for the development of drought resistance can help reduce some of the negative impacts. Effect 3. At 2.5 degrees Celsius warming, melting glaciers and the loss of snow cover over the Himalayas, the stability and reliability of the in northern India's glacial feet of river. What can be done? We should install in water storage capacity to prevent. Effect 4. India is close to the equator. Subcontinent sea would seem much higher than rise in sea level, higher than latitudes. What can be done? Coastal embankment will need to be built. Now, effect 5. Research founded that groundwater storage in dropped in northern India about 2 centimeters per year between 2009 to 2019. Today, groundwater irrigates over half of India's crops. What can be done? The efficient uses of groundwater resource will be incentivized. Conclusion: Paris Agreement in 2015 unanimously to resolve to try to keep global warming limit to 1.5 degree. Conference of Parties 26 in Glasgow, and then see Conference of Parties 27 in Egypt. So, very little positive in this direction. However, India's position is 8th among participant nations. A lot yet to be in respect of cutting down or erosion, encouraging afforestation. Thank you.
So here we have learned from Srimoyi the condition of India in respect of climatic change and what India is doing or should do to prevent climatic change and to reduce global warming. And we know that the COP 26 and 27 both have emphasized in keeping global warming within 1.5 Celsius. Though up to now we have not reached that target, we are endeavoring to reach that target worldwide. And all of you are going to participate and contribute towards that. We will look forward to it. Now next we'll have Bridge International School presenting before us.
A very good morning to all fellow delegates, organizers of the event and the audience. I am Ahmed Aradhya Islam and I am here to represent the interests of India. Now, as we all know, the Paris Climate Agreement was ratified on the 2nd of October 2016 in India with a net zero target of 2070. That is our net zero target year. Now, as of 2022, our nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, have two main goals. One is the reduction of emission levels to below 2005 levels by 2030. The other is increasing non-fossil fuel sources of power to 50% capacity of the national power supply by 2030. As far as the long-term strategy of India that has been submitted at the COP27 is concerned, and its reception by analysts, most agree that it is good on paper, but lacking sufficient data to indicate how far India is from reaching its 2070 net zero target. It is also questionable whether India is targeting just carbon dioxide emission or the reduction of all greenhouse gas emissions by the net zero target year. Analysts are also concerned with India's plan for the continuous development of coal power in its long-term strategy and its environmental and economic consequences. Now, as a rebuttal to the analysts, the Enhanced Transparency Framework, or the ETF, will, from 2024 onwards, mind you, make it mandatory for all countries to transparently report on initiatives taken in terms of policy making and adaptation measures. Support, be it financial, technical, or capacity building related, that is provided or received, and progress made towards achieving net zero target. This will all feed into the global stocktake, which will assess the collective global progress towards long-term climate goals. Additionally, the long-term strategy can be modified subject to new NDCs. And it is also to be noted that NDCs are submitted in cycles of 5 years. India is a growing economy with a burgeoning population, and while diversifying energy sources is in the cards, it must be remembered that we have adequate coal reserves which should be tapped into with a focus on carbon trapping techniques for reducing emissions. A recent report by the World Economic Forum demonstrates that air pollution and global warming in general cost the economy $95 billion a year in terms of damages to healthcare, and the lowering of productivity among the employable section of the population, from illnesses related to respiratory issues, heat strokes, allergies, etc. And it is thus in the best of India's interest to not waver from the net zero target year of 2070. On a separate note, I would like to congratulate Serbia for the development of the Liquid 3 technology, which uses microalgae to reduce carbon dioxide levels and increase oxygen levels through photosynthesis. Inclusion of this technology in urban planning projects, in addition to strict replanting policies at the national level, will benefit not just Serbia but India, and so financial and technical assistance will be something India will benefit from greatly in support from the other signatories to the Paris Agreement. Among notable initiatives in India for reducing the overall carbon footprint, one is by having built over 700 kilometers of national highways as of 2021 using plastic waste. This has the added benefit of recycling said waste and reducing both land and aquatic pollution. In a similar vein, the new target for India's national solar mission as of 2022 is to build 100 gigawatt of solar power capacity, while the National Mission on Strategic Knowledge for Climate Change in India has revised goals for research and development programs in the science of climate change and adaptation. It is to be noted that there are currently 23 active programs. All things considered, I would argue that India is on track to meeting its net zero target year if all things go well, and of course with support from the rest of the signatories to the Paris Climate Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful deliberation on condition that India is facing right now and what India is doing towards climatic change. You made a very important point regarding the reduction of emission due to coal, use of coal. This is a crisis that is being faced by all the developing countries, and according to the COP26, we have only achieved 45% of reduction in coal emission, whereas it should be reaching zero. And if we have to reach zero by another decade, by 2050, the target is, I think, 2050, by which this emission should reach zero level. For that, all of us have to really work forward and devise means, as you have said, that we are already thinking of devising means of cutting down on coal emission. Thank you very much for your deliberation. We now go on to the next presenter, Garden High.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The world is facing a challenge related to climate change today. Many countries have joined the Global Forum to plan strategies to combat climate change and save the environment, like the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, COP26 and COP27. I, Ayushman Dey, a delegate from Morocco, am discussing how well my country is facing the challenges posed by climate change. As Morocco strides towards a greener planet, it has been rated with a climate policy score of 17.23 by the UN. Morocco ranks third in the climate change policy category according to the Climate Change Performance Index. As you can see from the map, Morocco is bordered by Alboran Sea and Atlantic Ocean. So, it is a coastal country and is particularly threatened by rising sea levels and other climate-related changes. Is Morocco a sustainable country? Well, we have been following the Sustainable Development Goals. The new development model followed focuses on avoidance of pollution, climate change mitigation, preserving biodiversity, and water resources. In the Moroccan Constitution, Articles 31, 35, and 88 have given importance to sustainable development, preservation of natural resources, and economic development, respectively. I'll cover the National Water Strategy, the National Energy Strategy, and Morocco's fight against GHG emissions. The first one is the National Water Strategy. This strategy focuses on the construction of 50 large dams to increase the storage capacity to 32 billion cubic meters by 2030. Recharging aquifers is a major step to increasing underground water. Now let us see how Morocco is implementing the water strategy. Improved coastal zone management and the development of sustainable aquaculture. Ocean with its biodiversity is maintained by conserving it as a natural resource. Drip irrigation and sprinklers have improved irrigation network. Desalination programs have improved water condition. H2O Maghreb is a public-private partnership which aims to improve industrial and municipal water management. 18% of our GDP is dependent on our farming, but we employ 43% of our people. Thus, the Plan Maroc Vert and the direct seeding strategies have been implemented by Morocco. The second strategy is the National Energy Strategy. This strategy was established in 2009. We aim to increasing the share of renewable resources in total power capacity to 52% by 2030. This graph shows the cumulative capacity of Morocco's renewable power market. As you can see, we aspire to achieve 10 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030 to 2035. The question remains, how can more renewable energy resources be deployed in the generation of electricity? Well, I am proud to specify that solar panels, hydropower, and waste treatments have immensely helped substitute fossil fuel use. My country is stepping forward to lead in the production of green fuel for domestic use and export. Its target is to rank first in the generation of 52% of its electricity from renewable energy by 2030. As you can see from the graph, we aspire to achieve 52% of our electricity from renewable energy by 2030, 70% by 2040, and 80% by 2050. Morocco has mounted a robust response against GHG challenges. My country has committed to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 13% by 2030. Since 1970, CO2 emissions have increased by about 90% in Morocco. So you can see a steep increase in the graph. Emissions of GHG from natural gas are far less than those from oil or coal. Therefore, our government encourages fuels from biomass. Well, a lot needs to be done to combat natural forces of drought, rise in sea level, desertification, etc. Despite our positive efforts, we are a few steps behind in providing the energy generated from the Ouarzazate solar power station to the common people. The climate finance for Morocco is increasing day by day, but we need more funding to support our green programs. Although dams are important water resources, we are looking for alternatives to meet our water requirements. I have complete faith in my country. I know we will be able to overcome these challenges and make Morocco a greener and a better place to live in. Thank you.
I thank the delegate from Morocco for his wonderful presentation and a clear picture of what his country is doing towards climatic change. As we proceed towards urbanization, in spite of the Sustainable Development Goals set by UN, pollution will remain and we have to fight against it. But adaptation is one of the major ways in which we can fight this issue and move towards a better climate. And Morocco, I believe, is doing that and setting an example. Thank you very much for your deliberation. And now we go on to Hartley High School.
Good morning, judges, respected judges, teachers, and my fellow delegates. I am Adil Iqbal of Hartley High School, Standard 9, and I'll be representing Lithuania in this climate change conference. Over the past few decades, we have seen that why is everybody talking about climate change? Suddenly, why? So, widespread improvements in the quality of life in many of the world's population have gone hand in hand with increased demands on natural resources. Our planet Earth is struggling to keep up with increased demands in the average global temperature and the frequency of extreme weather events transforming ecosystems around the world and threatening entire species of plants and animals. Forests are drying up, there is less rainfall and more fires, and the glaciers of both the north and south poles are shrinking. Over the past few decades, Lithuania has seen a rise in average temperatures and an increase in the number of extreme weather events. These changes have posed a number of challenges for Lithuania in terms of climate change policy. So from here we can see that climate change is a very big factor for us humans. So the UN or United Nations has included climate action in its 17 SDG goals or Sustainable Development Goals. And climate action is the 13th goal, as you can see here. Climate action is the 13th goal. So about Lithuania, Lithuania is a small country bordered by, in northeastern Europe, bordered by Latvia in the north, Belarus to the east, and Kaliningrad Oblast, Russian exclave in the southwest. It has a land area of 65,300 square kilometer and annual population of 2.8 million and a GDP of 23,723.34 US dollars as of 2021. Lithuania is a temperate climate with warm, moist summers and cold, snowy winters. So now I'll be telling you about the climate change policies according to the NECP of Lithuania, which is the National Energy Climate Plan. So the first target is in sectors covered by the EU emissions trading system. GHG emissions are to be reduced by 43% compared to 2005 levels. So I have not got the latest results, but I've got 2017 results here. So in 2017, emissions in the ETS sectors decreased by 37% compared to 2005. And this, as you can see here, is a pie chart of the EU ETS GHG emissions. Second policy is in non-ETS sectors, GHG emissions must be reduced by at least 9% compared to 2005. So I was unable to find this result, but I have got the non-ETS emissions over here. In third policy, target 23% of gross final energy consumption to be from renewables by 2020 and 45% by 2030. So the share of renewables in 2019 was 25.5% in Lithuania. And this is a bar graph of the renewables in the gross final energy consumption. Fourth policy target is 15% increase in GHG reduction outside the EU ETS, that is the non-ETS sectors, by 2020 and 9% reduction by 2030. So Lithuania managed to limit the increase of non-ETS emissions to 7% in 2018 and expects with planned policies to achieve reductions of 21% in 2030 compared with 2005. Fifth policy is to reduce GHG emissions from all sectors and economy by at least 40% compared to 1990. So GHG emissions reduced from 45,070 kilotons of CO2 equivalent to 18,930 kilotons of CO2 equivalent in 2019, surpassing its target by 2%. Then there is target 10% of energy used in transport to be from renewables by 2020 and 15% by 2030. So in this policy, we are not doing well. 5.5% of energy used in our transport was from renewables in 2020, which is second last. As per the EU, then there is target 10% level of electricity interconnection by 2020 and 15% in 2030. Lithuania surpassed its initial target of 23% of interconnectivity with the European Union by 2030, which is much above the EU target. Then there is a target 20% reduction in GHG emissions by 2020 and 40% by 2030. So this GHG emissions is the total GHG emissions, including the EU ETS and the non-ETS. So Lithuania had a reduction of 58% in GHG emissions by 2016 compared to 1990. Last but not least, we are expecting climate neutrality by 2050. According to the NECP, Lithuania aims to decrease its emissions by 80% and ensure removals of 20% in order to reach the goal of climate neutrality by 2050. So now I have discussed about the policies, and I'll tell you about the challenges faced by us in achieving these climate targets. So the first challenge faced by us was lack of political will to administer climate change. Second is lack of financial resources to support climate action. We do not have enough funds to support climate action. Third is Lithuania also faces significant technical institutional challenges in implementing its climate policies. So we are hoping that in the future we'll be onboarding a knowledge partner who will help us implement these policies, who will help us reach our designated targets. Fourth is indemnifying consistency of integrated GHG and energy projections. Then there is non-identification of policies and measures beyond 2020. So we are not able to identify any more policies which can reduce climate change by, as of 2020. Non-identification, then there is non-identification of potential policies and measures without certainty on available financial resources from multi-annual financial framework beyond 2020. Then there is last challenge, development of NECP as an investment plan, identifying the most cost-efficient sectorial development measures. So our government is going for the targets which can be achieved by us currently, because we don't have the funds to achieve. Our government is going for the low-hanging targets instead of the high-hanging targets. That is, for example, we instead of having electric cars in our country, we are implementing a more cheaper option, that is solar panels, which will help us achieve climate neutrality by 2050. Thank you. This is all from my end.
I thank the delegate from Lithuania for his presentation and for highlighting one of the most important points here in tackling the challenge of climatic change, and that is the economic challenge which many developing countries are facing. And in COP26 and then COP27, it was emphasized that the developed countries will come forward with their economic package to help out the developing countries to face the challenge of climatic change. So that is being worked upon, and let us hope that all of us will wake up to this crisis, and the developed countries will extend their helping hand and increase their economic contribution in dealing with climatic change. Thank you very much. Now, let us go on to the next delegate, Indus Valley World School.
A very good morning to everyone present here. I am Ishir Narayan, and I will be speaking on behalf of the United Kingdom in today's climate change conference. To start with, I won't bore you with too many statistics, but I thought I'd just take a look at a few of them. First of all, is climate change a real problem? Yes. In the UK, we project 30% of our crop yield to reduce by the 2050s thanks to climate change. And is it a problem we're dealing with very well? Not exactly, no. We are currently at 1.2 degrees Celsius as our average temperature increase, which is actually above the world average of about 1 degree Celsius. If you look to the right of the slide, you can see a graph showing the atmospheric CO2 levels across the globe. And unlike the English football team, this is always on an upward trajectory. So it's gone up consistently since the 1960s, and it is still rising. So now that we know climate change is a real problem and we need to deal with it, how do we deal with this in the best way? I thought the best thing to do would be to go back to the history of climate change and understand why exactly this problem has come about. And we Brits are to blame again. In 1712, the British inventor Thomas Newcomen invented the world's first steam engine, and this steam engine was used to power the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was based on fossil fuel sources of energy, which increased the greenhouse gas emissions. If you look to the right, you can see a graph which from 1840s consistently, there has been an increase in the greenhouse gas emissions across the globe, which has been powered by the Industrial Revolution. So now that we understand the problem, what are we doing as a country to tackle it? We have two major branches here. The first thing we're doing is we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And on the second end, we are opting for sustainable, renewable sources of energy. So when we talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we're extremely proud of the Climate Change Act of 2008, which is the world's first legally binding commitment to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Our target with this act is to reach net zero emissions by 2050. We are currently on track. Our third carbon budget was to reach 37% below 1990 levels. We broke through that with 44%. And we are on track to hit our fourth carbon budget, which is 51% lower than 1990. If you look to the right again, there's a graph demonstrating what our projected plan is with the orange color of the graph that represents where we would like to go to in a perfect world at least. In terms of renewable sources of energy, the UK has over 11,000 wind turbines installed, and we are known for our very sad and rainy climate, but that also means there's a lot of scope for hydroelectric power, which we have made use of. Over 8,000 gigawatts of gross electricity is supplied by hydro, and we have about 5% of all road vehicle fuel being renewable. The UK recognizes that climate change is a global problem. It's not something that we're dealing with alone, and we are here to help other nations in need of any kind of assistance when it comes to climate change related problems, and we are pledging £11.6 billion to help nations suffering from the effects of climate change. I'm not sure how long I've taken, but I'm pretty sure I'm coming close to the end of my time, so I'll quickly conclude. We recognize that we as a nation have played a very important role, and I'm not proud of it, but at least we have played some kind of role in the current greenhouse gas emissions thanks to the Industrial Revolution, which we were the pioneers of. But we have made significant strides to reducing the current greenhouse gas levels, and we are, as I said, on track to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And we also recognize that this is an international problem, not something which is localized in just the United Kingdom, and we are pledging 11.6 billion pounds, to help nations in need of any kind of assistance. With that, I would like to conclude. I thank you all for your time and have a great day.
Thank you, delegate from UK, for a very clear and specific presentation today. And now we go on to Khalsa English High School.
Good morning, everyone. Myself, Afifa Ashif of class 10 from Khalsa English High School. Today, I'm here to speak on climatic change and its impact on Indian environment. Before moving to the main topic, First, I would like to tell you all that climate change is a serious global challenge today. Climate change is an issue that the whole world is worried about and whose impact is felt by all of us. India is among the countries most vulnerable to climate change. It has one of the highest densities of economic activities in the world and very large number of poor people who rely on natural resource base for their livelihoods with a high dependence on rainfall. By 2025, pressure on India's air, water, soil, and forests is expected to become the highest in the world. One of the most significant ways that climate change will impact the lives of the people in India is through its water resources. While water sustains life, it all too often wreaks havoc to devastating floods and droughts. The effect of climate change has recently been observed in some cities like Delhi, Hyderabad, and especially Chennai, where the city was facing with water crisis and was relying on alternate water sources like distant public water pumps, tankers, etc. Evidence for rapid climate change in India include global temperature rise, warming oceans, shrinking ice sheets, glacial retreat, change in rainfall pattern, etc. Climate change comes with its share of risks through which it affecting livelihood and the atmosphere of India. Evidence climate change in India brought forth the following points. Extreme heat, hot wave have been observed over the years. More than 60% of India's agriculture is rain-fed, making it highly dependent on rainfall. 15% of India's groundwater resources are overexploited. Climate change is expected to have major health impacts in India, like malnutrition and related health disorders. National Action Plan for Climate Change, National Clean Energy Fund, Paris Agreement, International Solar Alliance, Bharat stage emission norms are some of the responses that India has shown towards climate change. It is high time that the people of India should unite together to curb the rising hazards of climate change. Here, I would like to say a quote stated by our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi ji, that we, the present generation, have the responsibility to act as a trustee of rich natural wealth for the future generations. The issue is not merely about climate change, it is about climate justice. With this, I conclude my speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the delegate from India. Now we go on to Satish Chandra Memorial High School.
Okay, so from the presentations before me by my fellow speakers, we have already come to know the importance of climate change and why we should adopt some important climatic policies to cope up with all these climate changes. So I am Shaptarshi Mondol, a delegate of South Africa, and today I'll be talking of the climate changes in my country and the climatic policies adopted by my country. So our agenda is quite clear. First we'll talk about the climate of South Africa and then the climatic policies, followed by the challenges we face, and finally the hope for a brighter future. As you all know, South Africa is situated at the southern tip of Africa and faces a arid to semi-arid climate in west to subtropical in east. Also, South Africa is quite vulnerable to rising temperatures and changes in rainfall patterns. Our country is also a very significant emitter of GHG and adds up to around 1.2% of global GHG emission, which is quite huge with respect to the small population. Moving on to the climatic policies. The first two policies we have here are National Climatic Change Response Policy and National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. Both of these policies have somewhat similar function to identify the priority areas for action That is where we should invest more, where we should invest more time, and also the manage risks and opportunities associated with it. That here we have some opportunities to grab on, or there we have some risks, and we should be more cautious regarding that sector. The next one is carbon tax, which was launched in 2019, and it is levied from the industries on the basis of their carbon footprints. Thus, to some extent, it is forcing those industries to reduce their carbon emissions so as to reduce their carbon tax. The next two, Integrated Resource Plan and Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program. Both of these are made to increase the share of renewable energy in our country's total energy mix. The next thing is the climatic changes, challenges we face from these climatic changes. The first and probably the most important is our huge economic dependency on fossil fuels. Our country is quite reliant on coal. Around 90% of the total country's energy mix is contributed by coal alone. Thus, it's quite difficult for us to manage that coal or that economic dependency of fossil fuels. The second one is the limited institutional capacity. We all know that for the development of any country, there must be some institutions, some organizations or some NGOs maybe, which will be backing of the government, which will be funding the government by some means for the development. But in our country, it's quite less. Also, our country is a water scarce country. And we also have a memorandum of understanding with India to collaborate and conserve water. And we also have some social and economic challenges like poverty or inequality, racism, etc. And finally, we have a bit less foreign funding. After talking so much negative, let's now move to a hope for a brighter future. In this graph, you can see the emission of greenhouse gases in our country from 2022 to 2050. So now this is huge, but we are trying to achieve a net zero GHG emission by 2050. Now if the fossil fuels are reduced, then who will take that part? Obviously, we need some renewable energies. So this is an investment plan that we have planned for our investments on the energy mix from 2022 to 2050. So here you can see wind and solar power have the maximum, more than half. So both of these are renewable, non-exhaustible. So from here we can conclude how much we are trying to invest more and more on renewable energies. And finally, the electric vehicles. In the transport sector, we have currently the oil cars, oil buses are the maximum, and the electric part is quite less. But we are trying to achieve a completely electrified transport system by 2050. That's how my country is trying to cope up with the climate changes in our country, and I'm sure we will achieve this for a brighter future.
Thank you, the delegate from South Africa, for emphasizing on the crisis faced by South Africa in climatic change and all the positive steps that are being taken. And we hope that this will work and South Africa will come out of the main crisis, that is fossil fuel emission, which is a great challenge. And this has also been brought up in COP 26 and 27, where the developed countries have been asked to pump in more funds to South Africa to deal with this particular problem. Another thing is that there is a general saying in all these conferences that let us invest now when the crisis is at its height than to invest later to make a damage repair. So it's time that we think of the crisis right now and pump in as much of economic support as possible so that this can be controlled. Thank you so much. Now let us go on to the next presenter, Shri Shikshatan School.
Greetings, Honorable Chair, fellow delegates, and respected teachers present here. I am Prakriti Ganguly, a student of Sri Shikshayatan School, representing the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. And I thank the industrialists for their contribution to the common man to enjoy a boat ride outside their houses because of the prevalent climate change. Flooding has historically impacted Luxembourg, and the country has been hit by numerous floods.
in the winter. Climate change is causing major redistributions of winter rainfall across Luxembourg, which will increase the frequency of floods. Despite the historical vulnerability to winter floods, the 2016 and the 2021 extreme flooding events signify that the traditional weather patterns are changing. The frequency and the length of dry periods are also expected to increase as climate change progresses. Additional factors to be aware of is the potential for the inadequate management of the rivers, construction in the flood-prone areas, as well as a growing number of people and a demand for homes. Understanding how climate change may impact current and future flood risk is increasingly important as the risks increase in both magnitude and frequency. Luxembourg generates 0.34% of the EU's total greenhouse gas emissions and has reduced emissions at a slower pace than the EU average since 2005. Most economic sectors showed emissions reductions in the 2005 to 2019 period, with the exception of agriculture and the other emission sectors. The transport sector and the other emission sectors, which include services and buildings, account for 77% of Luxembourg's total emissions. The chart present here describes about the total GHG emissions by the respective sectors. Luxembourg's energy system is characterized by high import dependence and reliance on fossil fuels. Oil is by far the dominant energy source, covering most transportation demand, but also notable shares of heating demand in the residential and the commercial sectors. Natural gas is the second largest energy source, covering large shares of industrial, residential, and commercial demand. Although Luxembourg invests predominantly and jointly with the neighboring regions in public transport, in order to alter the current model split of homework journeys, a vast majority of workers from abroad still commute by car. Coupling these socio-demographic pressures with the location of Luxembourg at the heart of the main Western Europe transit routes for both goods and passengers, as well as its policy of low road fuel prices, lead to important impacts on the air emissions. Luxembourg reduced its carbon intensity in terms of gross domestic product, that is GDP, by 40% over the period against an EU average reduction of just 33%. Luxembourg's renewable energy options are limited by its geographical size and location. The main tool to increase the renewable share of total energy consumption is to lower demand via the energy efficiency measures. Luxembourg's renewable scenario for 2030 envisages a 19.6% renewable share through expansion of its territory. Luxembourg's 2015 energy efficiency obligation schemes have been strengthened for the 2021 to 2020 and 2020-30 period to cover all sectors, including transport, to the Lean and Green program, with increased penalties for non-compliance. Another renewed initiative is the Accord Volontaire, in which participating companies receive an energy tax credit if attaining a set efficiency target. In December 2020, Luxembourg adopted its climate law, introducing a climate neutrality target for 2050 and a 55% emission reduction target for 2030. With no naturally occurring fossil energy sources and no refineries on its small territory, Luxembourg is highly energy dependent, importing electricity, gas, and mineral oil products from neighboring countries, primarily Belgium, Germany, France, and Netherlands. Therefore, it is essential to reduce the energy demand on one hand while ensuring the availability of renewable sources of energy to be either produced on the territory or imported rather than the current fossil energy imports. On 3rd February 2021, the law restructuring the electricity market in Luxembourg was finally adopted, and one of its key aims being to facilitate and promote citizens' own renewable energy and consumption. Luxembourg has numerous support schemes to achieve its energy sector targets and long-term energy sector goals. In 2018, Luxembourg introduced a tender system for private vehicle projects and prepared legislation to support self-consumption of renewable energy and encourage consumers to be active market participants. Prime House is Luxembourg's main scheme to support energy efficiency, renovations, and building integrated renewable energy. The Climate Pact program, created in 2012, provides technical advice and funding to help municipalities implement measures on climate, renewables, and energy efficiencies. Not only that, Luxembourg has embraced an e-mobility initiative aimed at electrification of the transport sector to reduce the GHG emissions and fuel imports. Luxembourg expects a sustained growth in electricity demand driven by increasing population and economic activity, and by demand from e-mobility, heat pumps, and large data centers. Luxembourg aims to cover a third of 2030 electricity demand with renewable, mostly through variable renewable energy, that is called VRE, and from PV and wind generation. The government examines relevant planning processes and regulations to synchronize the grid infrastructure construction with renewable deployment and electricity demand growth. From the chart present here, it can be inferred that the high level of social awareness in place Luxembourg is successful in reducing the per capita GHG emissions over the past 50 years. Future vulnerability depends not only on the climate change, but also on the development pathway. Projected impacts on climate change can vary greatly due to the choice of future economic and social development pathway. New research on the potential impacts allows for difference in regional population, income, and technological development under alternative scenarios, of course. It is now clear that development can be a strong determinant of vulnerability to climate change. Thank you.
I thank the delegate from Luxembourg for her wonderful presentation, and we go on to Silver Point School.
A very good morning to one and all present here. I, Modhurima Mitro from Silver Point School, would like to talk on the topic India and the climate crisis faced by us. Being a country rich in culture and heritage, India has always held a very respectable position in the UN and has stood out to the world in many aspects. But is India perfect from every corner? Well, the answer is no. As the idea of perfection is a delusional pursuit, India is certainly not perfect, but we can strive to make it more advanced, make it better, and make it more harmonious in its relation to nature. India has utilized some significant policies, frameworks, and futuristic strategies to achieve beneficial climate activism. India being the global host of the World Environment Day, the country has been facing climate change issues for a long time. For that, we first need to know what climate is. Climate is a long-term weather pattern in a particular area. Weather is very unpredictable as it can change, ranging from hour to even years. Maintaining this pattern is exactly what climate is. And talking about climate change, it refers to the long-term shifts in these weather patterns. But what causes this climate change? Research has said that the main reason behind climate change is power generation, generating heat and electricity by burning fossil fuels, which causes a large chunk of global emissions, resulting in climate change. Climate change results in global warming. Global warming potential is basically the heat absorbed by any greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. Long-term effects of this global warming includes hotter temperatures, increased droughts, loss of species, climate change, carbon pollution, and energy. The Rio Summit, popularly known as the Earth Summit, took place in Rio de Janeiro in June 1992. To discuss the global environment issues, it produced a number of conventions with regard to the climatic changes and the protection of biodiversity and forestry. The leaders pledged to cooperate and work towards environment and the climate protection. To take a look on the policies on climate change, India has put forward synergies between development and outcomes for the climate. India was one of the few countries that passed the Energy Conservation Act in 2001, which underwent an amendment in August 2022. Some changes include consumers meeting their energy needs from non-fossil sources, application of the Energy Conservation Building Code to office and residential buildings for loads equal to or more than 100 kilowatt, and specification of the energy consumption standards for ships and vehicles. On August 3, 2022, the Union Cabinet, under the chairmanship of PM, passed the nationally determined contribution for the consideration by the United Nations Framework Convention on the Climate Change to reach India's goal of net zero emissions by 2070. The National Mission for the Green India, GMI, aims at increasing the quality of degrading moderating dense forests, ecological restoration of the shifting cultivation areas, mangroves, ravines, cold deserts, summing up to about 1.8 million hectares with different sub-targets. The methods of implementing these policies are formation of knowledge networks among the existing knowledge institutions engaged in research and development relating to climate science and facilitate data sharing and exchange through a sustainable policy framework and institutional support. Establishment of the global technology watch groups with institutional capacities to carry out research on risk-minimized technology selection for development crisis. On 30 June 2008, the National Action Plan on the Climate Change (NAPCC) was released. It is a national strategy of 8 submissions to help adapt and magnify ecological sustainability in India's development path. The principles of NAPCC are protecting the poor through an inclusive and sustainable development strategy sensitive to climate change, and extensive and accelerated development of appropriate technologies for adoption and mitigation. Although the past decade of rapid economic growth has brought many benefits to India, the environment has suffered, exposing the country to serious air and water pollution. Besides this issue, India is also facing problems of rampant deforestation, though it has reduced to a huge extent through India's ban on cutting of trees without obtaining environmental clearance from the Ministry of Environment and Forest. Growing population of poverty and agricultural growth have also added to these challenges. Though India is trying her level best to make the country a clearer and a greener one, these missions cannot be made successful without the contribution of each one of us. So come, let us join our hands together and pledge to be responsible citizens and work together to overcome all the environmental challenges and make India a fair, equal, and a green place to thrive on. Thank you.
Thanks the delegate from India for her deliberation, and now we go on to the BSS school.
Good morning, delegates of the House and Chairperson. The delegate of United Kingdom believes that climate change is the world's biggest existential threat. As the global economy falls to realign with a sustainable future, we have never been closer to overshooting our boundaries. Collaborative actions across all levels of business and society is the only solution to delivering agents and lasting changes. According to UN Synthesis Report 2023, human activity, primarily through greenhouse gas emission, is undeniably contributing to the climate change, which has caused global warming. Due to global warming, the temperature has increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius between the time period of 2011 and 2020 compared to the time period between 1850 and 1900. The atmosphere, the cryosphere, biosphere, even the ocean have undergone widespread and quick changes. Negative impacts, loss of life, even harm to nature and human being has been caused. At COP26, that is the Conference of Paris 26, 137 nations pledged to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030. There were certain and several aims which were taken by the UK presidency. The first and the foremost aim was to phase out the use of coal for energy production. Second aim was to secure a global net zero and to keep temperature 1.5 degree within reach. For this, we need to speed up the transition to electric vehicles, reduce deforestation, and accelerate the phase out of coal. Third aim is to protect the natural habitats and communities. We need to protect our ecosystem, or else our lives, even our livelihood, will be affected. The next aim was to mobilize finance. The international financial institution must play their part, and we need to work together, unleashing the trillions in private and public sector finance required to secure global net zero. The last was to work together to deliver. We cannot deliver without working together. We cannot eradicate the climate crisis without working together. At COP27, UK has set itself a legal target to reduce the greenhouse gas emission by 2050. The late Queen Elizabeth II at COP26, she delivered a speech where she said that history has shown that our communities come together for a common cause, and there is always a room for hope. The UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, he found that hope in Glasgow, and he said that there was one last chance to reduce the emission of greenhouse gas by 1.5 degree. He even said that UK will reduce 68% of its emission by 2030. The UK strategy for combating and responding to climate change is underpinned by the Climate Change Act of 2008. Reducing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emission is necessary. The Act creates the framework needed to fulfill this demand. The UK government has made a legal obligation under the Climate Change Act to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 100% by the year 2050. This involves cutting back of emission from the developed nation, as 20% of emission comes from the developed nation of UK. According to the Climate Change Act, the government must establish legally enforceable carbon budget as the first step towards the 2050 goal. The total amount of greenhouse gas that UK emits every year should be capped by the carbon budget, and that budget should be established 12 years in advance so that the business, society, and all the people get to know about that, and they have the time to plan and execute that plan. Scotland is obligated to 2045 net zero emissions target under the Climate Change Scotland Act of 2009. According to the people of UK, success or failure is not a natural act. It's in our hands now. Progress does not necessarily follow a straight path. Sometimes there are detours, sometimes there are ditches. According to the Scottish writer Robert Louis Stevenson, do not judge each day by the harvest you reap, but the seeds you plant. And there are many more seeds which are left to be planted along the path. This problem cannot be solved just in one day or by one conference. Thank you.
I thank the delegate from the UK for her deliberation and for emphasizing on the guidelines led in the two conferences of parties in 26 and Conference of Parties 26 and Conference of Parties 27. Those are very important landmarks, and we will come back to it during our interactive session. Now we go on to the Heritage School.
Greetings, fellow delegates. My name is Pratyush Gorai from the Heritage School, and I have been given the duty to speak on behalf of the Maldives at this environmental conference. We are acutely aware of the effects of climate change on our daily lives as a small island nation in the Indian Ocean. Our people and citizens, though of a small nation, still deserve the same rights and importance as any other country. As we discuss the lack of steps taken in our battle against climate change, our country sinks into the depths of the ocean. If the current global mean temperature of 1.1 degrees Celsius continues unabated, it may rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, signaling the end of Maldives. and our demise will be a bad omen for the rest of the world, as they will suffer the same fate at the hands of global warming. Our beautiful corals are being ravaged by ocean acidification. As our country's biodiversity continues to decline, it pains us to witness the decline of some of our exotic creatures, such as the whale shark and the hawksbill turtle. Sea levels continue to rise 3 millimeters per year, causing our islands to sink and forcing us out of our paradise. I had recently decided to visit the many islands in my country and discovered that the majority of them have been severely eroded. The common storm surges and stronger winds as a result of climate change are one of the main factors of land erosion. What I saw was only a small indication of the damage done to the islands. Our analysis show that 90% of Maldives islands face severe erosion. My people are subjected to terrible weather conditions that are gradually turning Maldives uninhabitable as seawater contaminates our freshwater source, affecting our agricultural systems. As I travel about my nation to assess the damage, Maldives appears to be becoming increasingly unrecognizable from the time I enjoyed its beauty as a child. To address the climate change implications of the last decade, our hardworking government collaborated to develop the Maldives Climate Change Policy Framework. Our 5 goals for this policy are as follows. Number 1, to ensure and integrate sustainable financing in climate change adaptation opportunities and low-emission development measures. Number 2, to strengthen a low-emission development future and ensure energy security for the Maldives. Number 3, to strengthen adaptation actions and opportunities and to build climate-resilient infrastructure and communities to address current and future vulnerabilities. Number 4, to instill national, regional, and international climate change commitments. And finally, number 5, promote sustainable development while protecting security, economic stability, and sovereignty from harmful effects of climate change. To fulfill the MCCPF, we have taken multiple steps which presented their own set of issues which we naturally tried to overcome. We built the Hulhumale, our artificial island, to compensate for the sinking islands, but it is not an effective solution because it risks damaging our already deteriorating coral reefs. We are aiming to produce 30% of our energy from renewable resources by 2030. Still, the lack of already diminishing land reduces how many solar panels and wind turbines can be constructed, and it makes our goal harder to achieve. And it is a shame to admit, but our high reliance on diesel generators makes the transition even harder than it already is. Many reef-protected areas and resorts have been set up to preserve our remaining coral reefs and protect the marine wildlife. But at the end of the day, environmental protection and waste reduction is dependent on our citizens. And it has recently come into light that our citizens are not aware of the issues our environment faces. So we have decided to implement environmental studies into our education system. It is upsetting that despite our best efforts, the world remains in grave danger. And it also reveals that other countries must step up their game. The major emitters must increase their contribution and set more ambitious goals to achieve net zero. However, commitments and future goals, on the other hand, are insufficient. This has been demonstrated even after the promise of providing $100 billion to developing vulnerable countries by 2025 annually. However, we are nowhere near achieving this. So we must take action to ensure that any financial promises that are made for the environment are completely met. I'd like to conclude my speech, or rather our plea for assistance, by saying that the time for discussion is over and the time for action has arrived. And as a representative of the Maldives, I can speak for all of us when I say that we may be small in number, but we are no less deserving of the right to live in our own country, free from the threat of impending disaster. We, people of Maldives, like everyone else in this room, deserve a safe place to live. Thank you.
Your appeal to everybody to save the environment is really touching, and should appeal to everybody to come forward for this cause. Thank you very much. Now the next presenter will be Vidyanjali International School.
Bonjour and bienvenue to the UN Climate Change Conference 2023. I would like to begin with a quote by our Honorable President, Mr. Emmanuel Macron. By polluting the oceans, not mitigating carbon dioxide emissions, and destroying our biodiversity, we are killing it. Let us face it, there is no planet B. The main objective of our country, France, in this conference is to fight against climate change and guarantee the spirit of the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was adopted by 196 parties at the UN Climate Change Conference 2015 and implemented a year later. The predominant goal of this agreement is to hold the temperature between 2 degrees Celsius, to pursue the efforts and limit the temperature to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. It is indeed alarming and a matter of utmost concern that human activities have caused around 1.1 degrees centigrade of warming till date. Hence, the impacts are already being felt in every region, and carbon budgets consistent with achieving the Paris Agreement temperature goal are now small and being rapidly depleted. Essentially, the impacts of the climate change will be much lower at a temperature of 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to 2 centigrade. We are making new financial commitments to double the proportion that is invested in adaptation by the developing countries by 2025. Mr. Emmanuel Macron, our president, has pledged to increase France's climate finance to 1.5 billion per year and to dedicate a third of that, of 2 billion, to adaptation. France has also doubled its commitment to the Green Climate Fund for the period of 2020 to 2025. That will be $1.5 billion. We also propose, in particular, that setting up of an international carbon market and a common reporting framework to maintain and progress the state's commitment to the parties of the Paris Agreement. Several declarations are being considered on this occasion on issues that France is strongly committed to, such as in keeping the commitments made at the IUCN World Conservation Congress. That is, the link between the climate change and the loss of biodiversity has been further addressed with the promise of funds $12 billion dedicated to forest preservation. In terms of energy, France has joined some 20 countries in signing the Declaration on Clean Energy Transition, which promises to cease all new direct public support for the fossil fuel projects by the abroad by the end of 2022. However, we still have a long way to go to limit warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. France has therefore signed 4 major climate change pledges as a part of its commitment at COP26. Firstly, reduction in production of oil and gases, end to financing of fossil fuel produced abroad by 2022, end to deforestation by 2030, and reduction in methane emissions. As discussed in COP27, France strives to make progress on the Fit for 55 legislative package and the carbon border adjustment mechanism. While the aim of COP26 was to raise global ambition, in particular regarding the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the United Nations synthesis report indicates that the states' commitments are not yet sufficient. COP27 is a conference to deepen ambitions and implementation in order to maintain the temperature to 1.5 degrees centigrade. The IPCC has highlighted that there is still a short limit to limit the temperature to 1.5 degrees centigrade. if states swiftly and significantly reduce their emissions by 2030 and reach carbon neutrality by mid-century. As the conference is being held in Africa, this will help Africa to maintain its economy by decarbonizing it and in exchange for the technical and financial support from several countries. This meeting also reflects of the parties on the solidarity and cooperation between all the countries participating in it. France is one of the major contributors to the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which will enable South Africa in not only decarbonizing its economy and also helping it developing it. Madam Crisoola, Minister of the State for Development, Francophonie, has announced that their commitment for France's commitment to helping African nations is very important, and she has also underscored that the France's support for a free energy transition through bilateral and multilateral partnerships with Rwanda, Vietnam, and Egypt. The Global Shield Against Climate Risk, a joint initiative of the G7 and V20 group of 20 vulnerable countries, was launched on 14 November at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. France will contribute 20 million euros in subsidies to the Global Shield Against Climate Risk. France supports the UN Secretary General's call for the early warning systems to become more widespread. To this end, France has announced that beginning in 2023, we will be doubling our contributions to the Climate Risk and Early Warning Systems Initiative, bringing the total to 8 million euros per year. Our country is one of the leading contributors to the Green Climate Fund, the main financial mechanism of the Paris Agreement and Global Environment Facility. As Louis Gordon has rightly said, that the climate change is Everest of all problems, the thorniest challenge facing humankind. Hence, we hope to direct all public and private financial flows towards achieving the goals to limit global warming and to boost resilience. Thank you all for your kind and patient hearing.
Thank you, the delegate from France. You made a very important point, because the beginning of all these discussions starts with the Paris Agreement. And we are targeting to follow what is known as the Paris Rule Book, by which the emission level, the pollution level has to be decreased, and we look forward to a better environment. Thank you very much for highlighting all the objectives of the Paris Agreement, which is very important. And now we go on to the last presenter, Calcutta International School.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I am Azwan Athani from the Calcutta International School, and I would like to talk about the United States of America and their relationship with climate change. Now, a quick overview of everything I'll bring up here. First of all, a large misconception with the United States is that they are a very large contributor of greenhouse gases. And while that is true, and we do acknowledge that, it doesn't mean that we aren't affected by the problem ourselves. Right, now this was supposed to be a very cool time-lapse video that failed, but essentially this is Alaska. And over the last 50 years, the melting of the Alaskan ice caps and the overall sea level rise has greatly affected the biodiversity in Alaska, the communities that live locally, and the tourism that they experience. And so overall, it is a massive issue for us. That's not the only one. The Gulf Coast of the United States has there's economic issues due to that. Then in California, there's heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and all of them impact our agriculture, our water resources, our public health. There have been deaths in California just due to the heat, and that should not happen anywhere in the world. In Hawaii, rising sea levels, similar to what the delegate of Maldives said, it's caused ocean acidification, coral reef bleaching, and so tourism, fisheries, some of our major economies are really taking a toll. And so here's the main issue. Now, these problems may seem general, but these are things that the United States has been dealing with firsthand, and we need to work with together as a global partnership. First of all, natural disasters. Right, global warming, as some people may not know, actually causes many hurricanes, and the United States, especially the East Coast, is extremely susceptible to them. Droughts and rising sea levels are also a large concern, as well as the economic impact, which I've talked about, and the loss of biodiversity. On the outside, the US may seem like one large factory, but the wildlife, the national parks that we have are really a pride for us. And so we need to take extreme measures to make sure they're kept secure. Now, here is something that we are not very proud to present as a nation, very honestly. But the United States is one of the world's largest producers and consumers of crude oil and other fossil fuels, right? Some of our major sources of energy are, where we consume the most electricity is, with electricity and transport. And these are both sectors where things like crude oil and natural gas are playing an important role in our greenhouse gas emissions. Our main import partners here are Canada, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia. And a lot of people actually fear that increasing our renewable capability is actually going to deteriorate our relationships with these countries. And that is another thing that is actually holding back the United States in terms of climate change. Second thing, our action is being extremely deteriorated because of these two figures right here. Republicans and Democrats have been at war for almost 100 years at this point, and it has taken a massive toll on our climate action. While Democrats do acknowledge the science, our current administration does acknowledge the science, right? Republicans, like our last president, the famous Donald Trump, first of all, they don't acknowledge the fact that climate change is even a real issue. And then due to that, a massive outcome of that was the fact that Trump actually withdrew from the Paris Agreement. He's the only leader in the world to ever withdraw from the Paris Agreement. And so issues like these in our own civil capacity are a massive issue to what we as a massive superpower of a country can contribute to the struggle against climate change. Now here's another thing. In the United States, the standard of living is expected to be extremely, good, right? Now, that is actually a downfall for us when we are trying to combat climate change. I don't know if this is very clear, but it says need a job. It talks about unemployment, and the fact is that the United States has one of the highest amounts of employment as a country, and so they contribute like lower end workers that could be greatly affected by climate change, like people that work in sectors related to coal or mining or electricity. There could be mass unemployment, and that would cause a whole lot of market failure and a large amount of issues for the country, and that again prevents us from taking the extent of action that we should as a country. Now here's the way forward. We've been very pessimistic, we've talked about all the bad things, but there are great things that the Biden administration specifically has done to combat climate change. First of all is our net zero government initiative. It is something that we are extremely proud of, and it is a lot of other countries haven't been able to implement as well as we have. First of all, this basically says that by 2050, as a country, the United States will be completely carbon neutral. How will we do this? First of all, we are subsidizing renewable energy like solar power. And our capitalist ideas may look bad to Russia, right? But it is an extreme benefit over here because it allows individual firms for their own profit maximization. It allows them to capitalize on the fact that we want renewable energy in the country. In addition to this is the fact that by 2030, halfway to our timeline, we want to reach a 50% mark, where 50% of our energy is generated from renewable sources or like taken from renewable sources, and only 50% of it will result directly in greenhouse gas emissions. Next, we have rejoined the Paris Agreement under the Joe Biden administration. It is a massive step for us, although it may not seem like. It was one of the first things he did when he came into office, and so it is very safe to say that if the Democrats continue, it is a massive benefit for our country's fight against climate change. The American Jobs Plan, now this is something different. We've talked about net zero the entire day today. The Paris Agreement has been talked about by many countries. But the American Jobs Plan is something that is specific to the US, and it is something that we are doing extremely well. Now, the American Jobs Plan initially was to end unemployment, to increase the lowest wages of our country and the communities. But what it has transitioned to, especially under, again, the Joe Biden administration, is the fact that now a lot of sectors, especially related to renewable energy, like solar power plants, and then are basically what they're doing is they're combating the loss of jobs from coal and from oil, and they are creating jobs for people who are willing to change from oil and from fossil fuels to renewable energy, and that is extremely important because it allows us then to take harsher measures against greenhouse gases when our people are not directly affected. This is a massive number right here, and this is something that the United States is extremely proud of. When Biden came into office, another one of the things he did, because climate change is a massive priority for us, is a $2 trillion infrastructure plan. This infrastructure plan talks about reducing dependence on coal and those forms of electricity. It talks, under this we have infrastructural benefits against climate change. For example, in Hawaii, like I mentioned earlier, coastal erosion is causing a massive amount of issue for the tourism, for fisheries and all of them. Now over here, under the infrastructure plan, we can actually build coastal defenses. We can actually build rock armor around Hawaii to prevent the massive negative impacts that climate change has on us. Now this is USA's brief relationship with the world. That is Captain America right there. And the world expects the US to be a kind of savior, a kind of messiah when when the world needs something. And honestly speaking, the United States fit right into the role, and we love the role. But the problem with that is that there is a large amount expected from the United States. The world expects the US to almost single-handedly end climate change, and it is impossible for a country to do that. That said, there is also a large amount of things that we have done. Now, this is basically a timeline, but what's done earlier isn't that important. What we've done, a major factor of this chart is actually to show that the size of our contribution is increasing over time. Right, in the beginning, in the 1990s, across 10 years, we signed the Kyoto Protocol that Morocco had brought up. We signed the UNFCCC, and we signed the Paris Agreement in 2015. The Trump administration was sort of a sad time for climate change, but then again, as soon as Biden came into power, we attended both COP26 and 27, where we made relationships with African countries which were moving towards solar power. We are signed to the Glasgow Climate Pact. The fund for responding from this year itself, from COP27, it was established that there would be a fund for responding to loss and damage due to climate change, right? And this basically brings me to the last point over here. This number over here is extremely important for every single country over here, and it is imperative that you look at this. 11 years is the time decided not by NASA, not by America, but the entire world. The UN has ratified this 11 years. This 11 years means that in 11 years, the world will start to have irreversible damage. Irreversible damage meaning we will not be able to go back to the paradise-like life that the earth had before this. Now this 11 years, funnily enough, was this 11-year plan was established in 2021. So now it's down to 9 years actually. But the idea is this. We are talking about very long-term plans here. We're talking about 2030, 2050, 2070, right? I think India said that by 2070 they would be carbon negative. We do not have that kind of time. We have 9 years, after which every single thing that will happen to the earth may be irreversible. This is an issue because, like France said, we have no planet B. We have to conserve this planet. The United States is already funding to a very massive scale, but other countries need to pitch in, especially extremely industrial countries. I understand they are at a stage of the demographic transition model where that kind of development is essential, but they need to keep in mind that they have 9 years to do this. After 9 years, this change will be irreversible and it will be very, very difficult to get back. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of a very meaningful conference on climatic change. And to sum up the whole event, there are certain points that came up which are common factors for all the countries. One is the emission caused by the use of fossil fuel, and which has to be reduced to 45% now to reach zero level in another by the end of this century, or the middle of this century. Lack of funds in developing countries, which is a problem which has to be addressed. And we came up with certain very good solutions like adaptability and renewable energy, etc. Now, I would request, we'll throw the conference open to the floor. If anybody has any questions regarding the matters that was discussed by the different countries, please come forward with your questions, and I would request the delegates to answer.
You had mentioned that under the Trump administration, the Republican-led Trump administration, you withdrew from the Paris Agreement, and under the Biden administration, you re-entered it. Based on current polls in the USA, with Ron DeSantis likely to be the Republican leader for the elections, and based on current polls, Biden unlikely to be re-elected, and Republicans to get power once again, can we really trust the United States to contribute to global climatic change with once again government changes and Republican-led government coming into power again?
So this actually brings up two of the points that I had mentioned earlier. First of all, what I said about Republicans and Democrats, right? Now, what I did mention was, okay, first of all, what you said, it's unlikely, well, poll results can't really be predicted. But developing on what you said, let's say Joe Biden did not win the next election. Let's say he didn't even stand. Who knows? What would happen then is that these actions are already put into place, right? For example, some of the actions that I mentioned here were actually set up by the Obama government, one or two by even the Bush government before that. And so a large amount of these will still remain unless they are stopped. Now, Trump may have been an exception because of the economic crisis that the US was facing due to the oil and natural gas from Russia and all of that. Now, earlier, the case was the fact that the economic benefit was the main issue. But now, considering what I said about Alaska, what I said about California, now it's a direct issue to the United States. So even a Republican government in the future, whatever the probability may be, it is still going to act on climate change because of the fact that it is directly affecting the US now. That's one. Secondly, what you said was about the role of the US towards the world, right? Because of this. Now, again, first of all, the $2 trillion plan, all of this for infrastructure, we are still signed on to the Kyoto Protocol. We attended COP26 and 27. And the idea of it is this, again, what I mentioned on the slide. The world expects the US to be a sort of superhero, right? And although we try our level best to do whatever we can for the rest of the world, countries also do need to take care of their individual issues related to climate change. Climate change on the whole.
Quickly responding to that, we're not expecting the US to be a superhero. We're just expecting them to do their part, as all of us nations do, to contribute to global climatic change. And I mean, I think you said it yourself. I mean, for example, when Trump withdrew from the Paris Agreement, it wasn't like global climatic change wasn't a problem. I mean, that was just how many years ago was that? Not very long. I don't remember. I'm sorry, but it's not too long ago. So the only concern is that can all of us nations here actually depend on the United States? And I'm worried the answer is no.
No, so can I add? I can, yeah. So that's what I said, right? The superhero was sort of a metaphor, but the idea of it was simple. You're asking whether the world can depend on the US, right? Dependency is something that every country in the world will have to depend on themselves for local issues, because that's the job of the government of a country. What you can depend on the US on is the fact that it will continue in its effort against climate change, and it will continue to help lead the world into a climate or sort of carbon neutral future, or a future where greenhouse gas emissions are reduced greatly. Tropical storms are expected to increase. What is Maldives', let's say, short-term plan, or like their plan of action if some sort of natural disaster happens to take place?
So my question is directed to the delegate of USA. So I think you must be aware about the Willow project, which will add 239 million metric tons of carbon emissions to the atmosphere. And USA has rejoined the Paris Agreement, and the current USA government is taking steps to improve the climatic condition of the state. So why did Joe Biden approve of this very controversial Willow project?
The idea of it was actually for NATO, for countries like Luxembourg, right? Because of the Russia-Ukraine war, a large amount of the trade and the oil dependence that a lot of countries had on Russia is gone. Countries like Germany are facing literally like power outages. And in a country with the development of Germany, it shouldn't be an issue.
Analyzing the statistics of how we have joined hands with these countries, we are actually developing. And regarding the power outages that you just mentioned, we are in the middle of a transition from being dependent on oil reserves to more energy reliable infrastructure.
Like renewable energy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What was happening is essentially the fact that because of the Russian dependence that was there previously, there was a large amount of oil shortage throughout NATO. I'm not pinpointing Germany or Luxembourg or anything, but there was a massive crisis because of the Nord pipelines being shut down and all of that. Now, what the US had to do in its role again as trying to help the rest of the nations is, first of all, for themselves, for their own needs. We need to, like, these kinds of resources are not renewable, right? They are, it's like one time, you drill the oil, you use the oil is done. So then what happens is the fact that it was the need of the hour. The economy and the lives of the people is still a priority for every single country. So what we are doing currently with the drilling in Alaska is actually this oil is not only being used by the US in places where it's necessary, but it's also being exported specifically to Europe, where countries like Germany that did have a very bad winter in 2022, countries like Poland, which are having an awful time even right now, they can actually help survive, like we are helping them survive with the oil that we're drilling. So these kinds of issues, like what needs to happen is prioritization, right? Climate change is a massive issue, but we have 9 years for climate change, and although that is a very small amount of time, the deaths that are happening in Poland and Ukraine are happening in seconds. So we need to help them. Not in the US specifically, right, but across NATO, because of the Russian oil dependency, like I said earlier, there's a massive crisis in the quality of life, in the existence of life, literally, in places like Poland and Germany. And because of that, there are measures that need to be taken. Obviously, we can't think of the world as in a very utopian way, right? We can't think that climate change is the only issue. It is not, right? Issues like the lack of oil across NATO, issues like the power outages and all of them, they are also a very, very important primary issue right now. So because of that, considering the fact that the US is already implementing so many climate change positive initiatives, we took the decision of increasing the oil capacity in Alaska so that we can help other countries and so that we can actually counter what is happening.
Thank you so much. That answers my question.
Now we go on to the next part of the program, that is distribution of certificates and mementos. Bloomingdale Academy High School, the certificate is to be given out by Mr. Arnab De from Satish Chandra Memorial School. Bridge International School, the certificate to be handed over by Ms. Ritoshree Boishya from the Heritage School. Next, Calcutta International School, certificate to be handed over by Mehrush Akhtar from Sri Shikshayatan School. Garden High School, certificate to be handed over by Mrs. Ombika Bose from the BSS School. Heartless High School, certificate to be handed over by Mrs. Hanifa Khatun from Kalsa English High School. Indus Valley World School, certificate to be handed over by Mrs. Madhu Suraiya from Vidyanjali International School. Khalsa English High School, certificate to be handed over by Mrs. Aparajita Chattopadhyay from Bloomingdale Academy High School. Satish Chandra Memorial School, certificate to be handed over by Mrs. Hena Iftikhar from Silver Point School. Sri Shikshayatan School, certificate to be handed over by Garden High School, Orunima Bosudatto. Silver Point School, certificate to be handed over by Mr. Bishwajit Patro from Indus Valley World School. The BSS School, certificate to be handed over by Ms. Ruchika Mukhi from Bridge International School. The Heritage School, certificate to be handed over by Mrs. Songjukta Bakchi from Calcutta International School. Vidyanjali International School, certificate to be handed over by Mrs. Konkona Ghosh from Hartley's High School.
Now we are at the end of the program. I take this opportune moment to express my thanks to all the participants, accompanying teachers from the various schools who have joined us in this conference. I thank the principals of the schools who have given the opportunity to their young learners to share their ideas with us. I express my gratitude to our moderator, Srimati Pradipta Kanungo, for being with us and giving her valued time. My heartfelt thanks to all the trustees and committee members for their cooperation. I also wish to acknowledge the devoted endeavors of Vidyanjali family, media, and all others associated to make this conference a grand event. Thank you so much. I would request all the speakers to stand and we will take a group photo.